Okay, so if you're watching this, you're probably a young man who was raised in an environment where you were raised by either a single mother or a mother that wasn't given the support that she needed. And much like you, something that I had to acknowledge had changed me and affected me. Because of course, as a child, you learn a lot of, your self-development and a lot of your beliefs in your childhood. And if you're raised in a scenario that is, less than ideal, of course it's going to affect you. So I want to pass on some of the knowledge that I've gained on this subject through my own personal experiences and research I've done to those that need it. Because I want to give you some context to your frustrations and let you know that you're not alone on this. I also want to preface this by saying that although, I may look like I'm a young man, I am actually 28 years old, which I guess is still a young man. But I do know a lot of people sometimes presume that I'm like 21, which, I appreciate and all. But, I'm getting towards unk stage, so I want to, just make sure people acknowledge that, I've been through my fair stuff. So make sure you stay to the end, because that's where I'm actually going to give you some actionable advice on what to do. So firstly, let's look into some symptoms and some usual struggles that men raised in this scenario face. So let's do it. So it's quite likely that you had to grow up pretty fast. Like, I'm sure people have told you that you have an old soul or you're very mature for your age. And although this is a compliment, it's actually due to some trauma that you faced. Because being the, emotional support and, sometimes problem solver for an adult as a child, it does affect you. It teaches you to suppress your own needs in favor of looking after everyone else. And this leads you to struggling to know how to stand up for yourself and to ask for help when you need it. And you'll definitely struggle to put yourself first. And there'll also be that level of guilt that you have when you're, looking after yourself and you're trying to put yourself first and make sure your own needs are met. And it's likely that you also had to feel this pressure of, being the man of the house before you probably even knew what that actually meant. Secondly, you also have probably been taught to crave female validation. And this is due to being raised by your mother. You were raised in a female environment where you were kind of rewarded for doing things that pleased her. And it's likely that you lacked this kind of masculine figure to kind of balance it out. And this creates men that seek female attention, either due to this attention being deprived from them as children since their mother was so busy working, or they'll try and find a partner that gives them this familiar sense of love that they had from their mother. So that kind of smothering motherly love. So you also lack a sense of self-understanding, which means you basically struggle to understand yourself completely. You'll be constantly seeking the validation and attention and acceptance from others. And you'll be quite the chameleon. So depending on where you are, you'll change your whole characteristics, what you believe in, even maybe the way you talk or way you dress to try and fit in with people that you're around. And it's likely this is because you didn't have a father figure to kind of instill that confidence in you and instill that kind of self-belief and self-understanding in you at a young age. So this causes you to try and be the best version of yourself for what everyone else needs, which leads you to becoming the people pleaser who lacks self-understanding and is willing to bend and twist themselves just to make people happy. You'll also undoubtedly have a lot of struggles in your relationships. You'll either be quite passive and avoidant, trying to avoid any, too serious situations or avoid any arguments or, disagreements. And you'll do this by basically trying to take the blame for anything that's wrong in your relationship, even when it's not your fault. And it's mainly because you're taught that it's your duty to, fix problems, because it's something that was drilled into you at a young age. And you'll probably struggle to collaborate with your partner and have a lot of trust issues since you kind of struggle to form closeness as you're so used to, dysfunction. A lot of men also struggle financially, and this is probably due to the scarcity mindset that's built into you as a young child. When you're raised by a single mother, it's less likely that you're going to have a lot of, disposable income at hand. So you'll probably be raised in an environment where, everyone's kind of money pinching and being quite frugal. And that kind of sits into your mindset when it comes to money. You'll probably have a lot of self-limiting beliefs around money as well, like I can't earn this X amount because I just can't, or I can't have that kind of job because I just can't. And you'll also probably be more likely to fall into bad spending habits to kind of fill that void that you have inside. A lot of men also lack a support system, so it becomes quite easy for you to become isolated. And due to the lack of family support and a lack of a kind of healthy household, you'll probably have a very small circle, which then kind of limits your options when it comes to people to turn to you for help or advice. And due to this self-sufficient nature that you've kind of acquired as a child, you'll be constantly freestyling and kind of making up as you go, which will lead to a lot of mistakes which you may not learn from because, again, you have this sort of mindset where mistakes aren't okay and that you should be the perfect example. And a lot of men are just frankly too ashamed to seek help because they've kind of internally just seen that anyone that asks for help is just weak, and it's a sign of weakness to ask for help, and really this couldn't be further from the truth. And this also leads to a lot of men overcompensating. So a lot of men that were raised in single parent households, they are more likely to have this kind of need to adopt hyper-masculinity, which is like a coping mechanism for lacking actual confidence. Like they'll feel the need to kind of prove their masculinity all the time. And it's probably due to not having a healthy example of what masculinity looks like in childhood. But let's be honest, like the kind of toxic masculinity, kind of showy outward masculinity is the easiest form of masculinity to emulate, because performative masculinity is very attractive. Like from the outside it ticks all the boxes, but it is very surface level and doesn't actually put anything positive into your life. Okay, so now that we've acknowledged some of the usual struggles and indications of, you know, being raised in a single parent household, let's talk about the actual actions you can take to, you know, actually live a more fulfilling life and limit the setbacks. Because healing from these things takes a lot of time and effort and patience. And so here are some steps that you can take to, you know, address some of these issues and actually help you become the man that you want to become. So firstly, you have to acknowledge your past. And not just acknowledge it, you have to accept it. So take time to reflect on your childhood and accept that it wasn't easy. You faced things that you probably shouldn't have. But it's important to recognize how these experiences could shape your identity, shape your behavior and your relationships. Because you have to accept what you can't change. What happened happened. Your childhood is out of your hands. But you can change your future, not your past. And secondly, I think it's important to get some help. What too many men do is try and figure everything out by themselves. And as humans, we have to acknowledge that we are not made on this earth to just be these lone individuals that can figure everything out on themselves and be completely self-sufficient. We as humans, we are kind of reared in communities. We need each other. So for me, going to therapy was something that helped me a lot. I've got to be honest. It really did kind of help keep the momentum of me trying to, you know, find my blind spots and figure out where I was kind of blind to my mistakes and where I was kind of missing out the things that are quite obvious. And the type of therapy that I opted for is CBT, which I think is cognitive behavioral therapy, which tries to understand why you do things and why you think certain things. And it kind of aims to get to the root, which usually is your childhood. And if therapy isn't your style, you can try and speak to people that you trust and people that you respect. And you can book a one-to-one call with myself if you want to pick my brain on any of these topics, or if you need any extra advice on this, and the link will be in my bio for that. Because it's important to acknowledge that you can't do it all by yourself. Having a support system is so crucial to your growth and just your journey of life in general. Like having people that you can rely on to provide you with not just emotional support, but sometimes just someone to hear you out. Like finding a positive like male example or a mentor for like a man who didn't have, you know, this father figure is so crucial. Like having someone that you can actually look to and go to for advice, who's actually there for you and is actually living the kind of stuff that they talk about, is very important. You also need to redefine masculinity for yourself. So you need to challenge these like toxic ideas you have of masculinity, because I'm sure you have like these kind of ideas of masculinity which is kind of based on maybe the media that you've consumed, the TV kind of you've watched, the movies you've watched, the kind of maybe even the things that your mum used to tell you about your dad when you were younger. And a lot of it is bullshit. Like you need to understand that as a man, you can, you know, having emotional intelligence is not a female trait. It's a trait of a strong, well-rounded person. So it's important to kind of surround yourself with men that have these healthy forms of masculinity, because they can serve as examples of what it means to be a strong and emotionally open man. You also need to get used to feeling, you know, the discomfort of expressing yourself. Get used to being vulnerable, saying what's on your mind, even if it's wrong. Like that's okay. Like work on trying to identify your emotions and understand what triggers you. Like communicating is a necessity as a human. We can't read each other's minds. You need to get used to speaking your mind and telling people what you think. And honestly, from my personal experience, people will not be used to it at first. If you go from someone who, you know, is always very internal, doesn't talk about how they feel, and then suddenly you start talking about it more, people around you are going to be a bit confused. They're going to be like, where's this coming from? And you know what? Let them be confused, because at the end of the day, it's going to benefit you. Getting this stuff off your mind, getting this stuff off your shoulders, it's going to benefit you. Like it won't be easy, but anything that's worth doing probably isn't going to be easy, is it? And in relationships, you're going to have to work on trusting again. I know it's something that is very difficult for us, especially when, you know, we've kind of been let down by someone that we're supposed to trust, our father. And this kind of instills us that we shouldn't trust people and people are untrustworthy. But this is something you're gonna have to kind of deal with and try and overcome, because it's just not true. Living your life being unable to trust anyone is gonna make you a lonely person who's just, you know, has this massive shell and defense on them that doesn't allow anyone inside. And you need to learn to take it slow in relationships. Like don't just rush into relationship after relationship, especially if you're not ready to be in a relationship. Like work on building that trust over time with someone before, you know, building that emotional closeness. And stop believing, you know, all the bullshit that, you know, all women will use your vulnerability against you. It's not all women. It's not all women. That is a bad woman. A bad woman will use your vulnerability against you, of course. But if you're able to vet properly and actually find someone who is on the same level as you, who actually wants to be with you long term and actually cares about your well-being, they would never do that. You also need to build on your self-worth, because although you weren't responsible for how you were raised, it is your responsibility to not allow it to define your life. Because you're not responsible for anyone else's choices but your own. So it's important to try and let go of the need to fix everything, to kind of control everything in your life. There's only so much you can do as a human. You need to focus on watering your own garden before you focus on what everyone else is growing in theirs. Like, learn to challenge these negative notions and perceptions that you have on yourself. Because you're not unlovable, you're not stupid, you're not a burden. You need to recognize that you have inherent worth, and no one's gonna do that for you but yourself. Learn to acknowledge and celebrate your small wins. You can do that by trying to reparent that little child inside of yourself, by trying to become the man that your father could never be, by trying to reach these goals and these milestones that your father never could for yourself, to benefit yourself, and telling yourself the messages that you needed your father to tell you as a young man, that you are strong, you are capable, you are smart, you are intelligent, you can have anything that you put your mind to. These simple things that just sound like some bullshit, let's be honest, that sounds like, oh, whatever. These are the kind of things that if you were told as a child, you'd probably be a very different person today. For me, what's really pushing me is trying to become the person that I needed when I was younger, trying to become that for other people, not just for myself, but now for other people, trying to become that figure that can instill confidence in others, that can instill wisdom in others. That's what's really driving me. And I think as a man, that's something that you need. You need to have that drive to not just care about yourself, but to care about the people around you. And you can only do that once you've, looked after yourself first. So focus on building a life that you can be proud of, that reflects your values and your passions. And try and break away from these patterns that were placed before you by your childhood, and create your own trail and blaze it, 420 blaze it, So yeah, thank you for watching to the end. I hope you found this valuable. I really did try to put as much value as I could into this short video. Got a lot more that I could say, but time is time. And yeah, if you want to talk to me about anything that I touched on in this video, I'll leave a link in my bio where you can book a one-to-one call with me. I've also got a Discord server that is also in the bio, it should be. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate you and I love you, brother. I really do hope everything goes well for you and that you actually use some of the advice in this video to improve your life. So yeah, cool. Speak to you later.